Welcome back, everyone. I hope you are all enjoying or have enjoyed lunch at this point. Before we get this session underway, I have just one bit of housekeeping. A cell phone was found on the ground. It's got a red case that says "Packed with Love," and I was told that maybe we should auction it off if nobody comes up to claim it. If you are missing it, there you go. All right. We got it back to its rightful owner. It's packed with love, it says on the case, so that's important. At this time, I now call TriCon 2022 Plenary Session 1 to order. And I invite our 3 district governors to the stage, so please welcome Sridhar, Karen, and Lisa.
Welcome, Rotarians. If you listen carefully to Dustin tomorrow, you'll hear him express the hope that you enjoyed connection, learning, and inspiration. We, your district governors, hope the same and are here now to invite you into those 3 things. So I bring you an invitation to connect. These multi-district events, TriCon, Presidents-elect Training, Rotary International Convention, are by their nature eye-opening and energizing. When we move out of our clubs and have a look around, we are often surprised by what we simply did not see and did not appreciate before. This weekend, please look around, see and appreciate. And please take one more step to connect. Connect at every level. New acquaintance, happy friendship, meaningful fellowship. Connect as listeners. Take time to really listen. And connect as speakers. Take time to open up and say what's true for you. At PETS 2019, then District Governor-elect Craig from 6270 came to that event in Itasca with the intention of listening. And lucky me, I had breakfast with him and I had a story to tell. And until that time, hadn't really had a moment to share it. And Craig invited me to share that story. And what's come from it is a lasting Rotary relationship that can bear fruit far into the future. So Rotarians, please connect. Thank you.
As Karen said, we are gathering this weekend to learn, connect, and get inspired. The education piece will come to you in a number of ways if you're open and willing to accept them. Your education will come first through the plenary speeches to us over the weekend by Dr. Richard Kite, who will focus on ethics, Kyle Haugen, who will focus on service and fun, Karen Kendrick Hans, who will focus on the environment, and Tom Gump, who will focus on growing Rotary. Learning will come to you via breakouts we are having throughout the weekend. You'll have a better understanding of Rotary programs such as cause-based clubs, Rotary Community Corps, Rotary Friendship Exchange, and how satellite and passport clubs work. You can also pick up more on fellowship, Global Scholars and Peace Fellows, Polio Plus, Rotary Youth Exchange, RILA, WAS, and any other Rotary-related acronym you would like to learn more about. You can find out about how Rotary clubs are working to empower young women and girls, or how they're working together on inter-club and inter-district collaborations. You can also get the secret to incorporating the vision of younger Rotarians into your club to help shape the new Rotary. You'll also have the opportunity to hear about specific club projects, such as Roots, which was developed to address the loss of ash trees through smart reforestation in Sheboygan, or the resettlement of recent Afghan refugees. You can also learn to create sustainable global projects or action-oriented clubs. If public image is something you're struggling with, we've got you covered with sessions on how to effectively use social media club runner in DAC-DB to run your clubs. You can also find out how to partner with local high school students to have them work as your own personal PR firm, or at least that's what I'm calling it. And while all of these things seem pretty Rotary specific, partner these with sessions on putting peace to work, diversity, equity, and inclusion, how to make tax-wise gifts, the future of American foreign policy, or our Braver Angels session on how to handle contentious conversations in a respectable way, and you will leave here a well-rounded leader. Let's go and learn.
Hello, Rotarians. Welcome to Rotary TriCon 2022. To be a Rotarian is to be inspired and to inspire others. The inspiring vision of the Rotary reads, "Together we see a world where people unite and take action to create lasting change across the globe, in our communities, and in ourselves." This is both a compelling and challenging vision that requires communication, commitment, collaboration, and contribution. It is through our 5 plenary sessions and 34 breakout sessions, the House of Friendship and Pines for Polio, that we share our stories, our ideas, and our aspirations. We communicate, we listen to one another, so that together we may all be inspired to realize our dreams. In the tiny remote town of Calumet, Michigan, I was inspired by Captain Don Kilpella and John Andreatti. They extended an enthusiastic welcome, saying, "We are here to welcome our district governor." I fervently hope that I can be half as committed and as enthusiastic a Rotarian as Don and Joe when I reach their youthful age of 94 and 96, respectively. I was inspired by the Rotarians of yet another tiny club of Antigo, Wisconsin. With no more than 17 members in their history, this club has sponsored Rotary Youth Exchange students from across the world for over 4 decades. That is the kind of commitment we hear about in this conference, to inspire and to be inspired. I'm inspired by the stories of collaboration that reach across the clubs, the districts, communities from across the world. 3 clubs of Stevens Point, Wausau, Green Bay coming together to settle Afghan refugees. 5 clubs of Fox cities collaborating across the district lines to provide free dental checkup to kids and veterans. Our collaborative global projects of 3 districts that ensures clean water in Guatemala, Belize, empowerment of women in India, and access to basic health care in Peru. Fellow Rotarians, these stories of collaboration inspire me, you, and every one of us to seek more synergistic collaborations. I am inspired by your generous contribution of time, talent, and dollars over the years that make all these good things happen, and we have come to expect of Rotary. I'm grateful and I'm inspired by your generous giving. Just look around this beautiful ballroom. Like me, I'm sure you're all inspired by the results of magnificent ideas and countless hours of labor contributed by scores of volunteers over the months to make this TriCon happen. How about a big round of applause for all of them? We ought to be inspired by our collective commitment, collaboration, and we assemble here after particularly challenging 2 years. A vision without action remains a dream. It's only through commitment to a compelling vision, through our collective contribution and collaboration that we can change lives and we can change the world. Go Rotary.
Let's hear another big thanks for our district governors. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on how we can all connect, learn, and be inspired this weekend. At this time, I introduce our guest speaker this afternoon. Dr. Richard Kite is endowed professor and director of the D.B. Reinhardt Institute for Ethics in Leadership at Viterbo University in beautiful La Crosse, Wisconsin. He teaches a variety of ethics courses dealing with issues in business, leadership, and the environment. Dr. Kite received his PhD in philosophy from Johns Hopkins University in 1994. He's the author of several books, including Ethical Business and Ideas Unite, Issues Divide. He co-hosts a podcast, for those who enjoy podcasts, titled The Ethical Life, and writes a bi-weekly column appearing in 75 newspapers across the country. At this time, please welcome Dr. Richard Kite to share his thoughts on citizenship, service, and social capital, keys to a healthy society. Dr. Kite.
Thank you, Doctor. Well, good afternoon. Just walking around last night and today, talking to good people. I'm inspired. My cup is overflowing. Then I turn on my phone and I look at news, what's going on in my community, what's going on in the world, and I realize I'm residing on an island of sanity in the midst of a raging, chaotic sea. And I'm thinking, how can we extend the sanity of Rotary to the rest of the world? And it's what I want to talk to you about this afternoon is the conviction that's been growing in my mind that Rotary has an answer that the rest of the world needs, and an answer that in some ways only Rotary can give. And to explain why I've come to have this conviction, I want to expand our vision a little bit, take you back around the world and back in time a little bit to say, like, what is the time we're living in and how did we get here? We're living in a chaotic time right now with profound dissatisfaction, not just with superficial structures in society, but deep structures in society. And the dissatisfaction is something that I've been seeing growing as an instructor at a university. I've been seeing it growing for a few decades now and accelerating year by year. And the dissatisfaction is not just with what we're doing on superficial levels, it's with the very ideas and the core institutions that have established Western democracies. And this is really troubling. And it's troubling because we can't just blame a certain group of people or a certain few ideas. It is something that's happening across political boundaries. It's happening across social and economic classes. It's also not something that just happened because of social media or anything that's happened, say, because of the pandemic or the George Floyd incident. It's something that's been going on for some time, and we've seen these societal disruptions happen before. In 1968, we saw something very similar when students around the country were profoundly dissatisfied with the way their universities were preparing them to engage with the world. And we saw how those kinds of disruptions on campuses spilled over onto the streets throughout the country. And what's happening is pressures that build up in society that work kind of like an earthquake. The pressures are underground and we don't notice them, but they increase and increase until there's a disruption. And we pay attention to it, but you can't say that earthquake happened because of something that happened yesterday or the year before or even 5 years before. It's a gradual pressures that have built up. And we won't understand what's going on in our society today unless we understand the underlying pressures that lead to these disruptions. If you look at that time, say between 1968 and 2020, what we'll see during that whole time, there's a gradual erosion in trust in institutions. And this is really important to Rotary because we are an institution that depends on the health of other institutions to accomplish our work. And so we're threatened with going forward in a world in which the very ground upon which we rely may shift and fall out from underneath us. And one of the things that makes this strange and really frustrating is that we are living in a time of about 200 years of progress, decade after decade, where we've made tremendous advances that have never been seen before in world history. In just about every way we care to imagine, we've improved the quality of life. So there's never been a better time to be a human being on the planet. And I'm going to show you just a few slides. I could show you hundreds of them and just overwhelm you with the evidence, but since I've got 20 minutes, I'm just going to show you some highlights. But here's one that almost summarizes the whole thing. For pretty much all of the world's history, about 95% of the world lived in extreme poverty. And that was a condition, say, in 1800, but then you get to 1900, and we're down to about 82% of the world's population in extreme poverty. By 1950, it's about 75% of the world in extreme poverty. Today, it's about 10%. This is incredible progress, and hardly anybody knows it. We don't tell our story of what we've done because of institutions. Why did this happen? This happened because of the Enlightenment, the development of the scientific method, technological process that came about because of that, and the growth of democratic institutions that understand the freedom and the worth of every single individual as having inherent worth that must be respected in our political institutions and in our social structures. And so we've established institutions based on these things, these political and social reforms, along with scientific ways of thinking and technological progress. And we continually, what we do within our organizations, we develop institutions that identify a problem, say, how can we collaborate, and we solve it. And we've been amazingly successful, and Rotary is part of that. We are an outgrowth of it, we are a beneficiary of it, and we continue to contribute to it. And we know that because of our involvement in things like polio. And you look at, so like, what has happened with polio? Well, since 1980, look at the reduction until there's virtually no polio left in the world. And we understand, like, well, what does it take to do this? It takes scientific method to discover the cause, discover a solution, the technology to develop the vaccines, and then all kinds of collaboration among institutions where we build bridges across divides to find ways of delivering these vaccines effectively. And that story that Rotary's been part of is replicated by many different kinds of organizations throughout the world in many different ways. And so we see what's happened with life expectancy. Well, for pretty much all of human history, life expectancy, depending on where you lived in the globe, was between 25 and 35 years of age. And that would vary based on region in which you lived. Now it's between 60 and 80 years of age, but you see the progress since from 1900 to today has been steady. We've seen a vast decrease in child mortality to around, right now, about 5% of children die in the first 5 years of life. But for most of the world's history, that was over 40%. Literacy, look at these gains we made in literacy. In 1950, over 40% of the world was illiterate. And today we're looking at around 15%. But that progress also comes with a cost. And the cost has been borne especially by the most developed countries in the world, which have had the most involvement with the growth of science and technology and institutions which have dedicated themselves and their resources most to solving these problems. And we measure that in the way in which we subjectively feel worse and worse about the world we live in. So at the same time it's getting better, we're feeling worse about it, and we're feeling worse mostly in the most developed countries. And we find ways of measuring this. We can measure it by the growth of anxiety, which has been going on for some time, and the invention of new terms that describe our experiences like burnout, which is a relatively new term, but we all know, and most of us have experienced it firsthand. Two countries with the highest levels of burnout, United States and United Kingdom. So this is the key question, and it's really important for Rotarians to be able to answer this. Why are we feeling worse about our key institutions when they're having such a positive effect on our lives? And there's a number of explanations for this. I'm going to share with you the primary one, and it's technology. And it's not just the fact of technology, because technology is also like a key thing in these improvements in our world, in our life. It's the pace of technological change which is growing at an exponential rate. And this is in some ways a very odd thing, because every kind of technological advance is made because we're convinced that that kind of technology is going to make our lives better. And it usually does in some ways, because what it does, technology does two things. It enhances power and freedom. It enables us to do things we couldn't do before, and enables us to do it more conveniently. This is what these smartphones do. I have access to a ton of information of the sort that I couldn't have dreamed about when I was an adolescent, and I have it at my convenience. And yet it also makes me more anxious. And here's one reason why. We are living in a world shaped now largely by technology, but human development doesn't change pace at the same rate. And by human development, I mean two things. One is our brains. We have brains that are a project of evolutionary development over millions of years. And so we're living with brains that still respond to the world as if we were living, say, 1 million years ago. That's why many of you are afraid of spiders and snakes, but you'll never be shocked by seeing a Dunkin' Donut. But donuts are responsible for a lot more deaths than spiders and snakes. We're living in a world in which our brains are just not suited for it, and it keeps changing ever more quickly. And that provides a kind of uneasiness that we hardly feel because we get kind of used to it, but it's an uneasiness with the world in which we're living in. We constantly have to calibrate to think about how are we responding to the world. We can't just react to it naturally, because our natural reactions get us in all kinds of trouble. But it's not just kind of what happens in our brains, it's also our social development. So the way in which my parents and my grandparents raised me did not prepare me for living in a world with smartphones. In fact, I'm encountering all kinds of things in my life that my grandparents could not have conceived. And see, this has never happened in the history of human development, where older generations couldn't give younger generations advice on how to live. And I try to now, like I try to raise my children and give them advice, and they're like, this is how you should live. And then I say, and how do you turn on the TV? And so they greet my advice with skepticism. But you see, like, how unsettling this, I mean, it's not unsettling just for us who are elders and want to provide advice and be helpful. It's unsettling to young people who think, who can give me some assurance about how am I to move forward in the world? How do I have a meaningful life? This is profoundly unsettling to them. And what I want to emphasize here, this isn't a recent thing. This has been going on for a couple hundred years. This change from a world which is fairly predictable to one which is not. Now, The fact that it's not predictable is a result of all these changes, these largely positive changes we made to make things so much better, but they've shifted the ground under our feet, so it's harder for us to know how to live a meaningful life and be engaged with the world. And one of the things I've been doing is using something called the Google Books Ngram Viewer. It's something Google created that just allows you to do word searches, and you can look at the frequency with which a word has appeared in the English language, printed in books and magazines and so forth, over the last 200 years. And I've been looking at word pairs, and it's fascinating what happens when you type in a word like goodness and efficiency and pair them together, and you find out, like, we've been talking about goodness less and less and less over the last 200 years. We've talked much more about efficiency today. And you see a sharp increase in the use of efficiency between 1900 and 1920, which of course is the growth of factories. But look at this pair, self and friend. In 1800, the word friend was used twice as much as the word self. Today, we use the word self more than twice as much as the word friend. And I want you to look especially at this period of time between 1860 and 1940, which is roughly the lifespan of Paul Harris, the time period of Paul Harris's life from 1868 to the 1940s. He was, he's living during a period of a profound reversal in the way that people talked about their relationships with one another. And he's in Chicago in 1905, and you can see 1905, this is about the time where these ideas, these friends and self kind of converge. And he's a young professional in a large city thinking about, how do I go forward in a new world where the lessons I learned from my grandparents and my parents didn't prepare me for how I am to engage with my colleagues professionally, living in this big city. And his answer is, I need a group of friends. But I need a group of friends that's different from the way we've traditionally gotten a group of friends together. I need a group of friends who can also, we can figure things out together about how to move forward professionally, how our careers themselves can help our communities and help the world. This is a radically new idea. And this is what Rotarians can do. I think we need to go back to our deep story and these lessons that we got from Paul Harris, because they came at a crucial time, which it has taken me a long time to appreciate. The word we use now that works best to capture what I think Paul Harris was beginning to see is social capital. And we measure social capital by looking at engagement in communities. Researchers like Robert Putnam, who kind of brought the term social capital to national attention in the year 2000 with the publication of Bowling Alone, used civic engagement as a primary measure of social capital. So how often do people volunteer? How do you belong to service organizations or organizations, voluntary associations like churches or clubs? Do you talk to your neighbors? Do you talk about politics? Do you vote? Do you give to philanthropic organizations? How engaged are you in your community? And it turns out if you have high levels of civic engagement in a community, those communities also have high social capital. And social capital is the level of generalized trust. How much do people trust one another, and how much will they extend the benefit of the doubt? And these are some slides I got from Putnam that he used in his book, so they're a little bit outdated, but I want to go back to that source. This is what he was using to show states with high social capital have better outcomes than states with low social capital on all the things that we want to achieve, and principally on the things that are largely politically divisive for us. And it turns out that if you have high trust in your communities and in your state, you're going to have good outcomes regardless of your politics. Like, trust is more important than all the things we argue about. If we have high trust in our community, kids end up turning out pretty well. If you have low social capital, low trust, your kids do not do well. Why? Because your resources tend to get wasted. And there's even a stronger correlation with trust and educational outcomes. And you can look at this at the state level, states with high social capital, Wisconsin, Minnesota, North Dakota, Iowa, South Dakota. They tend to have really good educational outcomes. States with low social capital have low educational outcomes. And you can even within those states, there's been studies, school districts with high what they call relational trust have better performance year after year than school districts right next to them with low relational trust. Murder rate, same thing. Tax fraud, same thing. So, what do we get from this? Well, two insights that the researchers on social capital have made that I think Paul Harris already knew about. One is bridging capital. This is the kind of trust you need to do big projects. How do we end polio? You need bridging capital. You need to have trust that extends across divides, across nations, across groups, because you need to collaborate with strangers. And when we talk about doing all the many projects that Rotary wants to do, it requires bridging capital. Here's what the researchers have found out. You can't have bridging capital without bonding capital. And bonding capital is like the mortar between bricks. If you want to summarize it in one word, it's friendship. You can't get large-scale collaboration among organizations if you don't, within those organizations, have the kind of friendship that makes people like one another and get along with one another. So our primary obligation in Rotary is to build friendships within communities so that we're capable of extending institutional trust and rebuilding institutional trust in our nation around the world. We can't go directly to trust institutionally. What we can do is build friendship. And this is Paul Harris, 1940. Looking at the world in crisis at a very scary time, and he's saying, I can convince world peace is achievable if we commit ourselves to Rotary's foundation of friendliness, tolerance, and usefulness. Friendship makes service possible. I think Paul Harris wasn't just a great man, he was a prophet. He saw the truth of something that people in his time didn't quite see. Today we have evidence for it. We as Rotarians also have experience of what it's like and how it works. It's a profound message. We have to have confidence and courage and be proud to be able to share with other members in our community and in the world how this works. Thank you very much.
Our great thanks to Dr. Kite for sharing this message, encouraging us to reach out and build those bridges, to connect, and to use our social capital that we have here in Rotary to extend to our communities. As Rotarians, of course, we think of ethics through the lens of the five-way test. Thank you, again, for expanding our framework to consideration of what a healthy society is. And in appreciation of your service, we confer upon you Paul Harris Fellow recognition.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Wasn't that inspiring? It certainly was. Well, this afternoon we have more opportunities to connect, inspire, and learn. We have our breakout sessions at 2, 3, and 4. The breakouts will be in Villa Gottfried A and B, Palm Garden A, B, C, D, and E, and the Grand LaBelle Parlor. You can check your smartphone or device or the website for any speakers or program descriptions. And outside of each breakout session room door, you should find a listing of the session program title. Of course, as alluded to earlier, our house, or halls in this case, of friendship are open for your visit. Now, what is the House of Friendship? Some new attendees might ask themselves. We've got exhibitors, vendors, partners who all want to share their story with you. It's a way to learn more about things like the Alzheimer's Walk, Books for the World, Rotaract, Women in Rotary History, and so much more. So please stop by these exhibits of projects and meet some of our vendors out there. Now, a bit of housekeeping. Restrooms are located outside the ballroom to your right over here. Just exit the ballroom doors, turn to the right, all the way down the hall there you will find the restrooms. And we will also be raising money, as you've seen, for Polio Plus by selling party packs. You can visit the table in the Grand LaBelle foyer across from the registration table there. And then, of course, join us tomorrow night, Saturday evening, for Pints for Polio. $40 gets you a custom Pints for Polio glass and a ticket to tour some of the fabulous establishments we have here in Elkhart Lake. District 6270 will be presenting awards in the Grand LaBelle Parlor during the social hour. All District 6270 Rotarians are invited to attend that. Of course, please join us for our social hour starting at 5:30 in the foyers, and we look forward to seeing all of you right back here for dinner. We do ask that you enter the ballroom through the doors in the Villa Gottfried foyer and begin finding your seats around 6:15 so we can get that program underway. At this time, I call TriCon 2022 Plenary Session 1 adjourned.